Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be showing you how to do vinyl cut contour cutting, whether it be automatic or semi, so stick around and I'll show you how. So our first start to this is doing our artwork, and then once we've done our artwork we can either do automatic contour cutting or semi. So let's get straight to it and start. So once you've got your program open, you want to now import an item. So the first thing I want to do is say that the best thing you can do is import a PNG. And why I say that is purely because that means it's already got no background and you don't have to play around too much to get yourself a cut line, so to speak. So once I've got my item here, we can go ahead and start adding our cut lines. So the first thing we need to do is select our item. We're going to right click, we're going to go all the way to our appearance, and then we're going to go add shadow layer. Now what we want to do here, and the reason why we're doing this, is because we need to create our own outer line, which the program has already done for us, but I want a specific one. So that's what we're going to do here. So first thing we need to do is tick print and cut outline, because that's what we need, not just a normal shadow. We make sure that it's either rounded or straight. Now I want rounded edges. And then we need to pick how far away from the item do we want the outline to be and where it will cut. So I'm going to go with an outline of around 3 millimeters. I'm going to push enter and see how that looks. Again, you may not think that it's more than enough. I'm just going to tick outline only, just so I can see exactly where the line is, or untick it. I actually want to take this to 4 millimeters around, so let's go 4, push enter, and that looks like it's going to be a little bit better cutting around there. Now once I've got that, I can now say okay, and if we zoom in here and we have a look at our item, you can see there is an outline that's just selected there. So now I'm pretty confident that's exactly where I wanted to start cutting. I didn't want it to be jagged edged as the artwork is around the edges, so we're going to be happy with that there. So now we just need to go and zoom out again. And we're going to go fit to window. Now we need to figure out the size of our artwork. How big do we want this to be? So again, we're going to select it, right click, transform, and we're going to go to scale. From here you need to either keep your proportionate, so that make sure if you change one measurement it automatically changes the other one, or untick it if you want a specific shape. It's your choice. So here I don't want to make them too big, so if you have a look at our ruler, I really think anywhere around 80 millimeters is going to be a good size. That way we can have a good grasp of how it's going to cut. So we change that to 80, push enter, and as you can see it changes the next one, and we push apply, and there we've got it. Now we've got a smaller image, and we can put that there in the top left. Next thing we need to do is now duplicate this item and make sure that we've got enough of what we need. Now because this is a test, I don't need to do that many, but if you're going to be doing a job, just add as many as you actually need. Okay, so make sure that your proportionate is ticked. If not, whenever you change one measurement, it will change the next one proportionally. If you want a different size shape, that is up to you. So here I'm going to go and choose a size around about 80, which I think is a perfect size to demonstrate what I want. We're going to push enter, and as you can see it changed the next one. We're going to push apply, and now the next thing we want to do is do multiples of. Now what I mean by that is I want to go ahead and make sure that I'm going to have more than enough as a test, just so we can see where it's going to cut. Now that our size is done, we can now go ahead and select it again, move it to the top left corner, and now what we want to do is we're going to just zoom in a bit, not too much, just so we can get to the same size on our screen as the page. So there's fine with me. I can also see my outline is still there, so we're happy with that. Now we're going to select it, and now we're going to duplicate this item as many times as we want, and with gaps in between so we don't overlap our cutting lines, so that we make sure we've got enough. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to Object, and we're going to go to Duplicate. Now we can see we've got a panel here that's going to allow us to duplicate either in rows or columns. So for instance, I only want to do 3 rows, so we're going to start with 3 rows going this way. And how many do we want on? Well, that is up to you, but I obviously don't want to print too many, so we're not going to do too many. I'm going to go to about 10 and then stop there, and that should be more than enough for me to do my test. And as you can see, it's now done 10 exactly where I wanted it, going in a row, and there's 3 columns. Now we need to just decide what our spacing is. So is 5mm going to be too much? Well, for me, whenever I'm doing my cutting, I prefer 5mm gaps between everything, so that when I'm cutting between each sticker, I've got enough space so I don't make a mistake, and I cut between them pretty well. So once we've done that, we can now push OK. The next thing we need to do now is just make sure that our cutter settings are done correctly. Otherwise, when we go towards our contour cutting settings, they're not going to be done correctly. So as you can see on the right hand side, there's all of our layers. You can delete a few or just hide 1 or 2 if you really want to. It's completely up to you. That's just a very nice thing that they've left there on the side. Alright, now that we've got all our images out there and they're spaced correctly, we now need to go ahead and select our artwork. Now the first one I want to be doing is our automatic contour cutting, and then we're going to go ahead and do our semi-auto afterwards. So in this process, we need to save all of our jobs to a memory stick, and then we go ahead and plug that into our cutter once we go ahead and we've already printed this file. But in order to print this file, we need to save it with registration marks. So once we've selected everything, and you can also make sure that you group it as well, which will help just in case you drag off one of your outer contour cutting lines on each image, which can be a pain because sometimes you don't see it. So select everything, then we go ahead and we can also preview it. Now this preview setting is quite nice because it allows you to see if all of your cutting lines are done correctly, and make sure you've got print and cut selected with registrations there, because that will allow you to see where your registration marks will be. And then you can also show the printable area if you really want to, but I prefer just seeing the red line just to make sure all my lines are in the right place. You can go ahead and push done. Then we can go ahead and go to our cutter setting at the top there. And then as you can see here on the right hand side, we have now got a whole bunch of gray outlines, which is our cutting, because again, we are cutting, not printing from this program. Now we are needing to do our settings correctly here. So the first thing we need to do in our general setting is make sure we choose the correct cutter. So today I'm going to be using my V Auto or my V Smart Plus, but I think let's go ahead and do our V Smart Plus 1.6. Then we need to go ahead and make sure we've got our connection selected correctly. Are we going to be using serial, TCP, or our USB? Now in this case, I'm going to be using USB when we're doing semi-auto, so we leave that there. The port you can leave as auto detect, or when we're ready we'll do a test connection. The rest you leave as it is. Those you can change at a later stage, but we are going to leave this as cut, not draw or pen, and we need to make sure that our offset is set to standard, since we're going to be using an easy 45 blade, and that will be used to be cutting most of my stickers. But now, because we need to now go ahead and print this job and we're going to be using a USB, we're going to say save to file and not print and cut. The print and cut option is only there when we're doing our semi-auto. Or if you are not using a USB flash drive, you're using straight USB to your computer, then you would use the print and cut. Now what we need to do is say add registration marks, because we need those in order to go ahead and print. Okay, so now that we've saved our cut file, we need to now save our print file, which is very important, otherwise we cannot continue with the rest of this. So what we need to do is select our artwork, then we're going to go to File, Export, and we're going to make sure that it's a TIFF, and we're going to name it Eagle Test Print, and then we're going to go and say OK and save. And then we're going to get another panel that's going to pop up here. We're going to make sure it's 300 DPI, but in this case you can choose any of them. It is really your choice. 300 DPI is the best to choose. We're going to say show registration marks. If I untick it, you'll see they disappear around the corners. We're going to tick it again because that's exactly what we want. And then we're going to say OK, and then that should save. Okay, so now that we've saved our print file, now we're going to head over to our printer and start printing it, and then we can start cutting from there. So we've gone ahead and we've printed our vinyl. So now we need to load it into our cutter, and I've got my USB ready, so let's go for it. So what I've gone and done is I've left just the two on the sides down and the rest are left up, purely so that I can quickly do a test to see whether or not I've loaded my vinyl in straight. Now, you got to remember that by doing the automatic registration marks, you can have it a little bit skew, which is what we call a distortion. So whether or not your printer has printed the correct or incorrect size and you've loaded it incorrectly, you can still actually allow yourself that difference. But if you're doing semi-contour cutting, you have to make sure it is dead on. Otherwise, you can have an irregular cut. So this way, I'm just making sure. So I'm going to go ahead. And what I do is I clip only the outer ones in, just so I don't waste some time. And then we're going to move our head. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move my head over. And what I want to do is make sure that that black line is in the middle of my brass head over there. And then what we're going to do is move our head all the way over and see if it lines up the same with the other one. If it doesn't, we just lift it up and move it into place. So we're going to move our cutter over. And we're going to make sure we stop it, just move it over a little bit more. And then as you can see, it's a little bit out, but in this case, because we're doing automatic contour cutting, it is absolutely fine to be a little bit out. So now we can go ahead and lift up the rest of our rollers. Put them down in this case, and that will mean that all of it is clamped correctly, so that no matter where it cuts, it actually is cutting into the vinyl because the vinyl is held down. And if it isn't, when the vinyl is above your bed and it starts cutting, it actually just scores the top surface. It doesn't actually cut your vinyl. So make sure that your vinyl is clamped down so that you can actually get a proper cut in, instead of having it just scored on the surface. And then it's going to be a pain for later when you're actually weeding away what you don't need and cutting it up for sale. So next, now we need to do is line up our head with our first registration mark. Make sure that it's not too far out. Make sure that it's not on the corner. You just want to make sure it's within that 90-degree angle as best as possible. Next thing we need to do is now insert our USB into the side panel. We're going to insert it into our U card. So now that we've plugged in our USB, what we're going to need to do is push the button repeat. And then we're going to go ahead and push it again until we can see U-Disc. Once we've got that, we can now go ahead and push enter. Then we can see that we have got Eagle, which is the file that we need. If you had multiple different files, you could change them by going left and right. So in this case, we've only got one, so we're going to go ahead and push enter. And that will start scanning the registration marks. Okay guys, it's finished doing its auto contour cutting. I'm going to quickly give it a good peel back and see if we have got exactly what we're looking for. And there we go. It actually did its job. It's now cut in the correct place. Now all we need to do is do semi-auto contour cutting. Okay guys, now that we've done auto contour cutting, we're going to move over to semi-auto contour cutting. Now we have to remember that we have to have it connected to the cutter, to our computer, so that we can do this. You can't do it via memory stick. And we have already set up our artwork as before. We have still got our outlines on our cutter here. And what we now need to do is make sure that we've got our cutter selected. So what we're going to do is select all of our artwork here. We're going to go over to our cutter option here. And then we're going to move over and make sure that we have got our V series selected. Now if you've got a V Auto or a V Smart Plus, this will not allow you to do semi-auto contour cutting unless you've selected a model with the same size but in V series only, not V Auto or V Smart. So once you've got that selected and you've tested your connection to make sure it actually connects to the cutter, so we're going to go over to our print and cut. And then here, as you can see, we've got our settings to do our semi-auto contour cutting. But before we can do that, we need to save our file to actually print. So we're going to go cancel, make sure your artwork is selected. You go File, Export. Now we're going to change it to a JPEG. We're going to find the file that we are looking for. And we're going to save this as our test print. Okay, don't worry about spelling. Make sure that we've got our show registration marks on, 300 DPI, our background is white, and then we can push OK to save. Now that I've gone ahead and saved the JPEG for print, we're going to go ahead and print and then come back to our program. So let's quickly go ahead and print. Okay, so now you need to go ahead and select your artwork again. We're going to go over to our cut with cutter. We're going to go to print and cut. And now we are ready, once we've loaded in our vinyl, to push next to start scanning our point to point so that we can do contour cutting. So let's go ahead to the cutter and load in our vinyl. So we've set up the file on the computer and we're ready to go. Now, before you go ahead, you must make sure that your vinyl is in the right way. And what I mean by that is you have to make sure that number 3 is the closest mark to you, so that number 1 could be in the far top left corner and number 2 mark will be in the top right hand corner. And just before we go ahead and push next on our program, we need to make sure that we leave our head in the general vicinity of number 3. So when we push next, it's going to go to number 1, and then we're going to need to calibrate and move our laser to pinpoint exactly on the dot of number 1, and then we move to number 2 and then on to number 3, and then we can start cutting. So we'll quickly go through that process and show you how we do it. So now that we have it in the correct position, the next thing we need to do is now push next on our computer. And as you can see, it's going to move over to position number 1, and then from there we're going to have to now move it until we are happy it's in the right place. So as we can see, where it is the red dot here, it's a bit out of place, and we now need to move this red dot over to the middle black one over there. So if we can move it to the left, keep going, keep going, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going. Okay, stop. One more. Okay, now go up. Go, 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 go. Okay, go back one. Okay, cool. Now as you can see, the red dot is almost perfectly aligned to our black dot there, so I'm pretty much happy with that. So now we're going to go ahead and push the crosshairs on the middle there, just to centralize it. And then you'll see it's going to move to our next position, which should be number 2. Now as you can see, it is a little bit too far to the right and a bit too far up, so we need to go 1 down we need to go about 3 to the left. Okay, that's pretty much spot on. So we can push the crosshairs again on our screen. Okay, now this is our final position here, and as I'm seeing it, I think I need to go 3 up. Okay, and that's pretty much spot on. So now if you have a look at our program, when you push the center crosshair, as you see it now, it's changed to a pair of scissors, which means it's ready to cut. Now I'm just going to make sure my blade holder is positioned correctly and is tightened. And before we even did this, I went and did a test cut to make sure my vinyl is not going to be cut through with my force. I'm very happy with all of this, and we can now go ahead and push those pair of scissors, and we should start cutting. Okay, so now that it's finished cutting, I'm going to go ahead, move it down, and we can see if we can peel our sticker and see if we're happy with our results. I'm very happy with the way this came out, and in conclusion, semi-auto contour cutting requires you to have a physical connection to the cutter so that you can pinpoint each location, move it so it actually aligns to that dot, and actually calculates it for you on the program before sending it through to your cutter. And in conclusion, with auto contour cutting, you can either use a memory stick or have a physical connection if you need, and by having it read each auto mark, it can then calculate it for you and then send the job according to where it's read your registration marks. Keep in mind that you always might put the vinyl in skew, and the reason why we do these processes so that it can then calculate the distortion and send the correct file and cut it correctly. As long as you've made sure you've done your calibration correctly, it will then cut it correctly.